You know, I spent quite a lot of time testing Citlali because I feel like a lot of people might be looking at her as just a glorified Mavuika buffer. And so in this video, I'm actually going to showcase and explain Citlali's synergy with all the pyro damage dealers, as well as some units from other elements, just to see if she's good or bad for them. But at the same time, I'll also showcase her personal potential and explain what's the current best build for her. So strap into your pillow and get ready to learn more about this Constellation Zero Granny. Alright, to start things off, Citlali is equipped with the Cinder City 4 set. Honestly, it's the best artifact set by a mile compared to anything else. And then for the majority of video, she will be showcased with thrilling tales of Dragon Slayers. In fact, in quite a lot of situations, this 3-star catalyst ends up being better than her signature for boosting units like Mavuika, as you can see here. However, there are some situations where her signature Starcaller's Watch ends up being better, which I'll talk about later on, but for the most part, yeah, just give her Thrilling Tales and Cinder City with triple EM, or Energy Sands and EM Goblet and Circlet, if you can get her burst up consistently. That's pretty much it. Oh, and for this showcase, her skill and burst are max level 10, while her normal attacks are level 1 because, just like her pillow, it's too fluffy and deals negligible damage. And of course, finally, she's Constellation 0, but I'll talk about her major constellations at the end of the video. Okay, so what does Citlali actually do? Well, I won't delve too deep into her kit because, quite honestly, it's very convoluted, when in reality, her playstyle is like press the skill, then burst, and switch out. That's like all of her gameplay. But basically, her skill creates a shield, deals a bit of cryo damage, and summons this little dude called It's Papa. By himself, he doesn't do anything besides allowing Citlali to enter Night Soul Blessing state. However, when she has at least 50 Night Soul points, It's Papa will then create this medium-sized cryo circle around the active character and apply cryo every 2 seconds. And how do you gain the points? There are many ways. They're all over the place, so you can look at this graph here, but essentially, yet again, just use your skill, then burst, and It's Papa will always have more than 50 points ready to start applying the cryo circle. And as for the burst, it's mostly there to just generate some extra Night Soul points. However, this is the only good source of damage Citlali can unleash. You see, the reason why you want a ton of Elemental Mastery on her is that the second passive provides extra damage increase for her skill, but it's still really low and doesn't do much. However, the burst scales off of 1200% Elemental Mastery, and that's actually so big that even when she's using Thrilling Tales, you can easily score a 100k plus melt. Although, word of caution, she applies a lot of cryo at the start of her rotation, so the enemy might end up losing Pyro Aura. But usually, if you run Citlali, Benny will be on the team as well, and you can do something like Benny's Burst, then switch to Citlali, use skill then burst, and there will be enough Pyro Aura left to let Citlali melt her burst hit. Oh, and the burst does additionally shoot out up to 3 of these Spirit Vessel skulls for each enemy, but the damage is crappy, and it's mostly there to just apply some cryo. But yeah, that's basically her entire potential as a damage dealer. Absolutely negligible damage unless it's the burst, which can then hit for a big number. And if you're using her with the signature, then you can really enable quite big melts in a team like this, which is really fun to do. But if you cannot set up rotations where you can melt her burst, then honestly her damage is kinda non-existent, and she's only there to serve as a support unit. And so, what does she provide as a support then? Well, the shield I've mentioned is pretty decent and offers a good defense utility. For example, with 710 EM I have here, the shield will be able to absorb about 10,400 damage. But if it's against cryo attacks, it will be 250% more efficient. But usually, the shield will have between 7,000 to 16,000 HP. Then, arguably, her biggest asset is the first passive, which shreds nearby enemies' Hydro and Pyro resistance by 20% whenever anybody triggers Frozen or Melt reactions. And of course, if you're using the recommended equipment, next unit you swap to will gain 48% attack from Thrilling Tales, or 28% bonus damage from the Signature Catalyst. And then, let's not forget when you cause reactions with her, she will boost the corresponding element's damage by 40% from Cinder City Artifact set. Finally, she's also able to deliver good amount of cryo application. But this is where things get tricky. So let's talk about if she's actually a good cryo applicator and teammate. Okay, so before I showcase all the Pyro units and few other teams, it's very crucial you understand that Citlali actually frontloads a lot of cryo application at start. And then the only source of cryo application left is that cryo circle that follows the active character around, thanks to It's Papa when Citlali has achieved over 50 Night Soul points. But the thing is, it's pretty weak cryo application, and it only gets applied every 2 seconds. For example, let's start with good old Diluc. Remember when people called him Diluc? Yeah, Anyway, so we can see once the rotation is set up, Diluc's burst manages to melt for more than 200k damage, which is nice. And then the first 2 hits also melt, but unfortunately that's when his pyro application overtakes Citlali's cryo aura and he won't be able to melt anymore. And trust me, I tried some tricks like delaying Diluc's attacks, but at the end of it, Citlali just can't keep up with Diluc's pyro application. Still, because she offers all those buffs I've mentioned, even the 3 melts Diluc can cost is pretty good. Moving over to Yoimiya, I think with her it's even a bit worse. Honestly, I'm not the best Yoimiya player, but I believe for vaping or melting her hits, you just do her whole attack string, but again, she quickly overtakes Citlali's cryo aura. Same goes for Klee and Yanfei. You can do a bit of melting, but it quickly becomes impossible to continue doing this, due to the slow cryo application coming from Citlali. Still, at least with these pyro damage dealers, it's clear they can melt some of their attacks at start, but after a few seconds into their rotation, they will then overtake with their pyro application and Citlali just can't keep up with them. But as I said, she can still offer all of these buffs, and in some cases, you could run her with another cryo unit like Kaya to help with maintaining cryo application, which, I mean, we've been doing this with Rosaria for quite a while now. So if you want more consistent melts, you'll need help from another cryo unit. But what about vape melting? Well, for both teams, it's gonna be a bit scuffed, since when bosses get frozen, the aura immediately disappears, so in other words, it messes up vapes or melts. And on freezable enemies, someone like Diluc can shatter them, unfortunately, since claymores deal blunt damage. However, I did find a nice bit of success when using good old archetype of Walnut. That is, Hu Tao with the spiffy new costume, Xingqiu or Yalan, and Osmanthus Wine Enjoyer, John Lee. In here, yes, vape melts are a bit iffy. We can see once Xingqiu's swords actually end up vaping, but overall, since Citlali can shred both Hydro and Pyro res by 20% at the same time, this is quite viable. The only problem I found is that it's pretty hard if not possible to trigger Cinder City for both Hydro and Pyro. However, even if it just ends up boosting Hydro damage, it's pretty good for someone like Yalan. Now, there's also Daddy Arlecchino. Honestly, I think Citlali for her is almost a straight-up upgrade. You see, most Arlecchino teams love to run with Zhongli, but Citlali can do the same things as Zhongli and more, except her shield will obviously be worse than Zhongli's. However, if you don't value that, then she ends up providing better buffs. Technically, Archaic Petra Zhongli can almost match Cinder City buff, but anyone who plays Archaic Petra know that it's pretty annoying to activate it. Also, let's not forget Arlecchino starts off with very big damage, and then it gradually decreases. So even if Citlali can only enable few melts for her, these will be the hardest hitting attacks, and in my book, that's pretty great. And again, you could just run Citlali with another Cryo or Hydro unit if needed. Same goes for Linny. Even though you want to build Mono Pyro teams with him, Citlali ends up being good to him, as about as good as to Arlecchino. So surprisingly, she's a pretty good buddy for a Fontaine unit so far. Still, can she actually enable consistent melts for anybody throughout the whole rotation? Well, ironically, Lantern Ride is approaching, and you know who's part of it? Gaming. Yeah, so Gaming can actually melt all of his attacks. Keep in mind, I am showcasing here C6 Gaming, but it mostly just provides a massive boost to his damage. But basically, since you have to play that stupid minigame where you have to catch his little pet after each plunge, usually this delay allows Citlali just in time to apply enough cryo to melt it yet again. But seriously, don't do anything else. Even a single misclick normal attack will absolutely mess up the rotation, as you can see here. But yeah, overall, Citlali for Gaming is a massive upgrade and his best teammate. I'm sure all 5 of Gaming players will be overwhelmed with happiness. Speaking of which, I already talked about this in Mavuika video, but yeah, for her, Citlali is the best support. Even with that slow cryo application, you can do something like dash after 4th donut to maintain cryo and melt almost all of Mavuika's attacks. Plus, since Mavuika badly needs fighting spirit, Citlali consumes about 90 or less Night Soul points, which are then used to fuel up almost half of Mavuika's burst. Still, while Citlali is great with Pyro units, is she great for anyone from different elements? Yeah, she's actually quite good with Chaska, who technically is also a Pyro damage dealer due to that wacky bullet system, and running her in double Cryo or double Pyro teams does wonders. But then we also have Neuvillette. Honestly, for him, Thrilling Tales does nothing, and this is where Citlali's signature weapon becomes very nice, since it will provide that meaty 28% damage boost, and on top of that, shielding for a C0 Neuvillette especially is a very good source of defense. Then there's Mulani. Ironically, you'll most likely vape her damage, not melt it, if running her with a good enough Pyro applicator, since Citlali's cryo application won't be able to overtake that aura, which I guess finally becomes a feature, not a drawback. But yeah, Citlali's buff for Mulani are much appreciated. And then for freeze teams, it's a bit scuffed to be honest. She's kinda trying to kick Shenhe out of team comps, although Shenhe is still one of the best supports for crowd damage dealers. And after taking a long vacation, she's finally gonna show up on that Chronicled Wish banner. Still, if you play Citlali in freeze teams, where hydro damage is contributing a lot to overall DPS, with units like Yelan, Xingqiu, or Furina, then yeah, that 20% hydro resistance shred, among other buffs Citlali provides, are very nice. So, is Citlali worth pulling for if you don't get Mavuika? I mean, I would say it depends. As you can see, she's quite a capable support, and if she can manage to melt her burst, she can also contribute a fair bit of damage. But overall, you just gotta take a look at those teams I've showcased and decide for yourself if she will be good for you. Otherwise, if you pulled for Mavuika, then yeah, Citlali is very much a serious upgrade for her. And I do like the fact that she is absolutely a breeze to build. Just slap Thrilling Tales with Cinder City. Yeah, it might be hard to get EM on all three pieces for Cinder City, but it's like fine to use Energy Sands as well, or if you go with her signature weapon, then you can even build her as a traditional damage dealer. Although keep in mind, the shield will be crappy then. But I would say her signature is not worth getting when Thrilling Tales exists, unless you want to play her with non-attack scaling DPS units like Neuvillette or Mulani. In fact, I'd say her constellations are pretty darn good. C1 is kinda like Shenhe's Quills, it will provide flat damage boosting and improve her Leaf's phlogiston consumption, but it's C2 that's pretty broken. Basically, she will boost characters' elemental mastery by 250 and decrease pyro and hydro resistance by additional 20%, so 40% total. And this constellation basically skyrockets damage for Mavuika, Gaming, and greatly improves damage for all the other DPS units I've talked about. Overall, I like Citlali's design and the way she works, but clearly, she's not able to sustain melts for almost all pyro units other than Mavuika and Gaming. Is that really bad? Not really. Obviously, it would have been nicer if that wasn't the case, but because she still brings a lot of buffs and even shielding to the table, she ends up being a pretty darn good support, even when she's not in Mavuika's teams. Anyway, hope you found this video useful. It's day 2 for me with barely any sleep. Just need to work on the Pyro Traveler video, it's coming very soon, so I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and press the like button on this video, or else Granny will throw her pillow at you. Bye bye!